Solar PVcast by Shift, a podcast exploring solar energy and the role it plays in improving our lives and our planet. Here's your host, Chris Palliser.
Get ready to dream. To dream of a future where every home, every building is built affordable, is built healthy, and is built future-proof. Now, that's a word that we're starting to hear more around this passive house world. But I mean, if you build smart, if you build efficient, then solar, what we talk a lot about, makes even more sense. And you can truly power your life via the sun. Smart and efficient building, that is what we're going to be talking about on this episode. Excited for my guest. First, though, the Solar PVcast is brought to you by Shift. For all your solar and energy storage needs, make sure to visit shift.ca. Thanks to them for powering the show today. Okay, let's dive in. I want to welcome to the show the founder of Core, climate-oriented real estate. Joining us all the way from Europe right now, Stéphane Doise. Welcome, Stéphane.
Thank you very much, Chris. I appreciate being here.
Thank you for the conversation, and that's what this is all about, a conversation. And I'm gonna lean. I gotta actually add from this intro, Stéphane, a little background here. Architect, engineer, part of designing the extension to the Munich subway system, and a firefighter. So smart and brave. You're checking all the boxes.
That brave can also be another word for dumb. But
either way, you got wonderful experience in this space, which is obviously why you started Core. Now, you live in Vancouver, BC, but you're also from Europe, yeah?
Yeah, correct. So maybe, yeah, I think it's a good it's a good way to start, or maybe how the link also works between fire services and construction. My push. So I was born in France. I grew up in Europe, and in France, worked mostly in Germany. And I've been a fireman for somewhere around 20 years in Europe, both in France and then after that in Germany. And what actually pushed me all the time was always to figure out how can I help and solve a problem. And so as a little kid, you see firemen and you just think, oh, they solve problems, and they do. But the thing is actually, what I came to realize then on calls in France was that actually, as a fireman, I was not able to address the root problem of the issues, especially if you think, for example, of social inequalities and the French ghettos that have a little bit of a reputation, which lead to a lot of social calls, but also some medical car fires and all of that. That was the era. And from there, actually, I transitioned then to thinking, oh, maybe actually how people live and where they live is actually what leads to the problems. Therefore, I got actually pretty interested in architecture and urban planning. I had a few people also at fire services that were in the field, so that also increased my interest in there. And then working in the field of construction real estate, that was still actually always what I was trying to figure out. How can what is actually the root problem? What is the root cause of all the bad things happening? It might be a little bit arrogant to try to pretend that you can solve it all, but that's a little bit the drive. So maybe that's the connection behind all of that.
Well, and you're right. Firefighting, you're coming to the end of the end of the situation. You're the Band-Aid, you're the fix. But again, bringing this back to this building smart. If we built smart, maybe all of a sudden that saves the firefighters and saves some lives. And there is a bigger picture, 100%. So on the vein of building smart, we had a brief chat before this, and I really love this. Growing up in North America, most of the listeners and the viewers of the podcast are in North America. You mentioned this idea of building in North America versus building in Europe and how we approach that. Can you speak a little bit to that?
Yes, and full disclosure as well, I don't necessarily carry the full truth of everything. So
Yeah,
if
of
people
course.
disagree and have other elements, I'm always happy also to hear them. So please feel
For
free to
sure.
reach out and correct me afterwards.
Yeah.
But I'll speak about what my observations and what I've heard and read from others on both sides of the pond. Um, the main driver in the last since the Second World War in North America for housing has been something that has been um, steered or driven by um, the idea that houses or buildings are financial assets. And so I thought it was pretty interesting. I've read somewhere, I can't recall the exact source, but that houses, for example, in North America lately were flipped around every 7 years. And it was also always kind of the time that was required until a few years ago for prices to continue to go up, and therefore for people to be able to cash out and move to the next to the next larger, better house or the next better neighborhood. Um, so there was kind of a take and dump type of situation for housing, which is fairly different to the base idea of housing or of the culture that somehow prevails in Europe. And when I'm speaking about Europe, it's mostly the German-speaking countries, France, where the idea is also to build something as a legacy for the family, and that might also continue be passed down. There's also the well, there has been frequently also the option, for example, for the kids to build their house actually in the garden of the parents, because the lots or the regulations allow to build a little bit differently usually, and to densify this way. And people that build in Europe are usually also triggered by the idea that they don't want high maintenance costs. They also want um, a certain outcome and a reliable house for themselves, but actually also with the idea that they would pass down the house to the next ones, and it should still be a sturdy, solid, robust house. So I think that's one element that changes quite heavily how things are done. There is obviously also the fact that one side, so the North American side of the pond is a lot younger historically speaking, and there has been also this idea of the pioneer and figuring out how to build quickly structures to accommodate people and businesses wherever it would sprawl following whatever resource discovery. So there is obviously also a little bit of a difference of a drive there. Historically speaking. And then there's another aspect that we also talked about. It's on the energy side of things. So it's um, I believe North Americans complain about the prices of energy or about rising prices of energy. And it might not be they might not be aware that, for example, in Germany, electricity is 5 times the cost of what it costs, for example, in BC. So in BC, roughly, it's around 10 cents a kilowatt hour, Canadian dollars. And you will be paying somewhere in the 35, 40 cents, euro cents per kilowatt hour in Germany,
Wow.
with obviously a few differences here and there, and obviously it depends on the time of the day, etc. So
Right.
there are different pricing models, but as an order of magnitude, it's roughly a factor five. The other thing is also Europe is not an energy producer. It imports almost the integrity of its fossil fuel usage. And fossil fuel also in Europe is around 80% of the total energy being consumed. And we've seen, despite, for example, the French having that very strong nuclear power plant program after the oil crisis of 73 and 79, there's still a very strong dependency to foreign imports, sorry, my bad. And that also means that from a strategic perspective, or even also just the thought of availability of energy, it's also something that can scare people, especially then homeowners that are tied to the asset that they have. And I think also in terms of generations. So there is a different approach also on that side in terms of how energy efficient or also how wasteful one could be or should not be.
Right.
before even talking about efficiency, is about actually wasting that much.
Yeah. Well, and
So therefore, it has changed also how people build, and therefore the topic of insulation, etc., came quite a bit earlier. Because as long as you have abundant energy that is cheap, relatively cheap, you can be wasteful.
well, and that I think you summed it up beautifully. That is all of those reasons are why in North America we approach this building, get it up fast. You see neighborhoods just pop up out of nowhere, and you know that they're losing some quality in that, because whether it's the housing crisis, or maybe that's another part we can talk about addressing that, but the housing crisis that's going on in this country, but this idea of building fast over building quality has consumed us, and it's just become the way it is. And obviously you're trying to change that at core.
Yeah, that's actually one element of the problem that I'm trying to solve all at once. So not to have actually an opposition anymore between quality, efficiency, and time. So there is the option also to build fast but good, also high quality. So it's not necessarily something that opposes each other, but you do have to think a little bit wider in the sense of how you plan for your supply chain, because you do have to put more effort in planning your supply chain. If you only build whenever the timing is right and you just want to quickly develop something, sell, and you're out again, then you just take whatever trades will be there, and if you don't need them anymore, then that's it. If you actually go for some quality and repetitiveness, you have to think also a little bit in terms of manufacturing, which then also changes how you approach construction, because the moment on you go in the direction of having some sort of factory, then you also need a reliable output, and you can't necessarily think of just having constantly ebbs and flows of depending on the externalities that guide the real estate market, whether interest rates, immigration policies, other political impacts, capital flows around the planet, etc., etc. Tariffs.
Yeah. Oh my God. Do you see it? So this idea of building affordable, building healthy, future proofing we're like babies here in Canada, but this has been happening for a lot longer in Europe then? Or is the tech still new there?
It's a tough question. It's always hard to compare two different sides just by a criteria.
Right.
Because usually the system that is behind it is also very different.
Right.
But so my impression is actually that you can build higher quality at a lower cost in Europe, generally speaking, at equal system without changing the European system.
Right.
That being said, from my understanding so far, so the roughly construction cost in Canada, or let's say the lower mainland of BC, you're going to look at around 70% of the construction costs, or the hard costs, that are actually labor, and 30% is actually material. And if you look at Europe, you're going to see actually a split that is more like a 50-50 split. So 50% is material, 50% is labor. There are different aspects in there. One is the fact that there is a lot more of a habit to plan in advance. So there is a lot less of that idea of having the builder that just figures out while building where the plugs will be. That's not really the European way. You're going to spend more time to actually define everything in advance. And that also means that actually your cost breakdown and your estimates can be a lot more accurate. That's my takeaway so far. The other thing, though, that should not be that we should not forget about as well is that building in Germany, for example, you can take labor from everywhere within the European Union. So what happens also is you have an easy access to a pool of trades that are cheaper because their minimum wages are actually different. So
Oh.
you have a typical flow of workers on Monday mornings and Thursday afternoon, Friday afternoon on the highways between the large cities in Germany, and it used to be Poland. Now Poland actually is. I mean, when people are talking about high quality builds in Germany, actually it's Polish quality. In all fairness,
Right. Yeah.
and now you actually have more trades coming. So Czech Republic, that was already, and now it's actually also more. For example, the Balkan countries, Bulgaria, so other countries as well, that supply with fairly cheap labor. So that might also be a factor that plays a role in there. Even though this cheaper labor usually comes in only on larger projects, so not on a single family house, for example.
Right.
So
Are you seeing? Sorry, I was just
yeah,
thinking.
I think another aspect as well is the level of training, of formal training, is actually also, from what I have the feeling might be true, is actually a lot higher in Europe compared to North America, generally speaking. I've heard that actually also from North Americans who's been on the trade and have just witnessed traveling to Europe and visiting training facilities in Europe, for example, or in Switzerland. So I'm not trying to be arrogant here.
Yeah. I mean, there's a reason why, when people say something's European built, or if you look at cars, this is built in Europe, there is this idea in North America that this is quality. It's just kind of, whether it's true or not, there is this for sure idea that is the case.
So there are, anyway, there are many factors actually that lead to differences also in cost on both sides. But there is a trend everywhere. I mean, the topic of affordability prices is something that is on both sides, and it's something that's omnipresent in all of the OECD countries. So that's something so everywhere, construction and real estate is trying to figure out a way to build in a cheaper, more affordable way.
Well, and that kind of is the next line. This all sounds great, but is it expensive to build healthy, to build future-proof? Is it more expensive than building a regular home? And if that is the case, how do we change the minds of people in North America that it's the better way to go? That's a big question.
Yeah, it's many different topics at once.
Yeah, I know.
How many hours do you still have?
Totally. Let's affordable. Does it cost more money to build a future-proof home than a not future-proof home?
So from what I'm looking at so far, I must confess though that we're also just at the beginning. So we have the first project actually rolling right now, and we're looking at different ones after. But right now, actually, we're cost competitive, if not actually better compared to averages. There's also two different sides of the cost aspect. There is obviously the cost to build it, but there's also the cost to operate it and to maintain it, to keep it over time, to heat it, to power it. So this is also where, for example, the topic of energy efficiency and solar, for example, comes into play. Yeah. And I believe you've already talked quite a few times about the economics of solar on houses, also, for example, coupled with EVs. So it's not necessarily more expensive, but it's actually also about simplifying how you build and trying to remove any excess. So the issue, I think, and it touches actually all aspects of society. The moment you have abundant energy, you don't have to be efficient with what you have. You can be wasteful in every part of the process, because cheap energy in any shape or form, whether it's having another diesel truck that is going to do another run for very little money, or having more workforce that will come to the site, etc., as long as you have that abundant energy, you don't really have to think through what do you use for what for which purpose.
Of course.
So actually taking and breaking back down the building on the base basic physicalities of a building. So if you think of how would you build a house 500 years ago, you're addressing it differently than nowadays, just because you didn't have these means. But in simplification, so there's I mean, in other industries, other people have done it. I mean, you look at EVs, for example. You can try to convert an ICE actually in so talking about internal combustion engines, not the ICE. It's everywhere in the newspapers.
Yeah.
But taking a combustion engine and transforming that into an EV, or you actually just think from scratch again, what should it be? If you think from scratch again, then you might actually have the better efficiencies in the system, the better material choices, the more efficient design, which then leads to the better cost efficiency as well.
Well, solar's kind of the same discussion around, yes, there's an upfront cost, but in the long term, you're getting stability, you're getting no maintenance costs, and building smart is essentially the same. So if you can build competitively to a standard build, yet your maintenance costs are way down, then this makes sense. So why aren't we doing it? Why isn't this happening?
I do have the solution for you.
You do? Yes!
Finally. No, so I'll have to disappoint you on that, but we've already talked a little bit on that as well. I think it's a change management issue, or it's a change management topic, and big changes are actually pretty hard for human beings. We aim for comfort. We're pulled this way, like comfort is safety, or safety is comfort. So changing things, changing value chains, changing like you need to change also. Ideally, you will also change regulations. You would also change some of the zoning, of the building code, of the. I'm not talking that we need to do that for us to achieve our numbers, for example, at first, but ideally you push the boundaries even further, because if you have a different context, then the set of rules should also potentially be adapted as well. So change management is actually a fairly difficult thing, and we as humans are in the previous life as a manager in a larger corporate environment, and one of our coaches or trainers was mentioned that science shows that humans can actually embrace or support or be okay with 2 larger changes per year, so roughly 1 every 6 months. That's the amount of time that you need. Which then also means that if you bring it up to on a societal level or on an industry level, that tells you also how much you can actually change in little time.
And you have to change together. You have to change a group of people as well.
Exactly. You need to sync everyone, and that's why I think actually. So the approach that I have is in the end you have to lead the way, and you have to experiment yourself and show, and then you have to share what you've done, and you have to try to get everyone aware of what is possible and where limitations might be. So that's what we're also aiming to do, which also means involving, for example, local governments, etc. Since we're building a little bit different, and we are in the realm of passive house principles, whatever you want to call it, not necessarily certified passive house, but the values that we get from a heating perspective are in the realm of passive house certifiable. So we could get certification from that perspective. But so we build differently. Therefore, actually, fire behavior would also be different in the building, because
there's
you
the
have a tighter. exactly. So just to
Yeah.
show actually how holistically you need to change things if you want to do big changes, since the fire behavior would be different in an airtight building that is built with mass timber, then ideally you also need to inform and train your local fire and rescue services, to show them, hey, the house will behave differently if it
Right.
burns. So therefore, it can be
Yeah.
actually different traps for you, and your standard approaches for the fire,
Wow.
for
Yeah.
fighting a fire would be different.
Totally.
So that just to show you how such a little detail is also impacted by
Yeah.
change.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Wow. It's the butterfly effect. It's
yeah,
one little thing. Could
exactly.
you speak a bit about how you build? How
Yep.
you build at Core? You said you got a project. What makes Core special, and how are you building these future-proof homes? What are you using?
So we're using the sun, this material number one, uh, and the sun in different shapes and forms. The biggest shape of it being mass timber, as well, timber is actually a produce of photosynthesis, which is then actually the produce of sun on Earth. Um, so we use actually a mass timber envelope. Um, we actually start with a mass timber foundation or basement, which is sealed, um, to the ground, and then on top of that, then we continue with mass timber elements, which specifically it's dowel laminated timber. So it's not cross laminated timber, which is a little bit more widespread and known. So
Wow.
CLT is the typical word. So DLT, the difference is that instead of using glue to keep the wood together, we're actually just using wood dowels, and there is no glue, no metal, no nothing. It's just actually wood on wood that holds each other stable. Um, we wrap all of that in actually an insulation, which is wood fiber. So actually sawmill leftovers compressed into, through thermal and pressure phenomenon, then merged together into an insulation panel. So also no glues in there. So fully natural material as well. And then on top of that, you can then add a wood siding, and in certain cases, you have to go for non-combustible, depending of the code requirements, the local code requirements. So sometimes we will have also to use some metal,
Right.
and then on the interior, technically, because we're using a mass timber element for the envelope, we can actually leave it as is for the inside, and we don't need that much more on the interior. So by using very simple elements that can also be fairly local, most of, by weight, definitely most of it is actually produced in BC. Um, and by value, actually, also most of our components are produced in BC. So we can actually have also a very local economy building this way. We have local partners that are small and medium-sized companies. So we can therefore also use a network that is very flexible, and doesn't have much overhead as well. So
What
that these are
about
also elements of how we build.
right?
And
Windows, less windows, more windows? You talk about using the
the,
sun. I'm just trying to think. You want to let the light
yes,
in, but then
e-
also heat goes out.
exactly. Well, that's there's actually a fairly simple simple solution for that. So Windows is here you have to remember that my background is actually with an architectural training, or master's in architecture. So therefore, I'll always have that idea that buildings need to fit the site. So you need also to have the right openings where you need them. But I also think you shouldn't be wasteful with full glass everywhere, because a view also needs to be framed, in my opinion, in my experience. If you have
Hmm.
a full open buffet type of all you can eat type of buffet view, how much do you actually enjoy it still?
Right.
That's maybe a little bit more of a philosophical consideration. You have to be careful, obviously, on where you position the windows. Nowadays, though, with the performance of modern Windows, it's a little bit less also of an issue. So the technical aspect can compensate a little bit for a view on the northern side, for example. But for the shading part actually, and this is also going back to the conversation of building with sun. So the 500 years ago, when you would build, you would have to think carefully where your energy supply comes from to heat the building. So either it would be your cattle that would be on the ground floor, and you would live above, and you would live in a fairly tight envelope, and you would also try to get actually as much sun as you can and lose as little as you can with smaller windows, for example, and the right materials, and grouping everything around an efficient heating system. So we taking that in nowadays term, you have the option to easily create openings that give you view, light, connection to the outdoors, connection to nature, but at the same time protect them from the high sun in the summer, just by having a little bit of an overhang, for example, or just having some good old physical shading. There is quite a few shadings that are not that common in North America so far. They're actually little lamels, like aluminium lamels. Lamels? Does that make sense?
Panels?
No, they're like wrap stores. Could that be wrap stores? Does that make sense?
Maybe to someone listening, but I'm just not in that world, so I'm sure you're right.
In my world, it makes sense.
There you go.
Well,
we'll go with that.
they're just actually you can just they're just oh, how can I describe that the best way possible? I think I'm gonna need my Google help here. It's not very good for the podcast. I'm sorry about that.
It's all good. This is live.
But maybe it can help actually to I guess Venetian blinds, like if that makes sense. I should have found that earlier. So you can actually orient the inclination of the blinds.
Right.
So you can actually have a solar protection at the same time, still the view and the light coming through. That's fairly common actually in Europe on facades, on buildings here. Not that much over there. So we're also looking to bring that over there and make it more of a standard.
I mean, this sounds like you said, it's all about planning. It's more about planning than actually building. And when you've put all this thought in, it sounds expensive, but you're saying you've been able, like what about the training? What about the training to do dowel logs? I know how to screw in a screw. I can do that, but I don't know how to do dowels.
Well, the magical part about all of that is that it was also about how do we achieve that using an existing supply chain that barely needs actually any change. So we're not building anything fully new, and actually some companies in BC already have the production capacity, and I'm aware also that other companies are looking into building that capacity. So because it actually requires also very little capex to get the manufacturing for that done, and we're using in the end actually 2x4s, 2x6s, 2x8s, so that's standard lumber that you would get from any supplier.
Right.
So we don't even have to change that supply chain, because if you would want to do that, then the change management you have to do, going back to the previous topic,
would be 2 changes a year. That's it.
Way too big to be able to come to anything cost competitive. So therefore, we're actually using these smaller companies that actually have, I believe, also a vision for the future, and have a little bit of quite a thrive of trying to do things better as well. So it's not all coming from me. It's definitely a collaboration, and I can build up on the work of many people that have been. Right. They've been. Some of them have been working on these topics for decades.
What about
and now it can all come together?
Yeah. What about on the roof? This is where the solar's got to come in. So solar's a part of these beautiful builds, right?
Yeah, definitely. So the thing is, on one side, we are able actually to lower the consumption of the buildings to a minimum. So right now, we're looking at roughly cutting by around 90% the consumption of electricity per. Now I might get confused. It was per unit. So that's the number that we're looking at. So compared to the average household in BC and what these households might achieve. And once you actually lowered that as well, and then on top of that you add solar. And my assumption is as well that buildings, everything that is added to a grid and to a system should be added value for the system and not the consumer of it. So if we're thinking of the power grid, if we can lower our consumption to a minimal and we can increase how much we can yield on the building, on one side we can increase the resiliency of the building because we just have more production compared to what we use on site. So when there's an outage, then you can rely a little bit more on yourself. We're also going in the direction of having battery packs as well in the buildings. And the other thing is obviously then if you produce more than what you consume, then you can actually also supply the grid, which in the global direction of electrification, which on one side is definitely a must from a climate change, climate disruption perspective, but on the other side, just from a pure resiliency or pure future-proof business approach, because we all know that fossil fuels actually have a finite stock. So, solar energy is definitely endless, at least at human scale.
Actually, the kids tell me anytime I do a class presentation on solar, there's always one kid that raises his hand and says, nope, 4.6 billion years, our sun's going to explode. And I'm saying, yes, you are correct. But for now.
and that's quite a few years compared to the stocks, when you compare it to the stocks that you have in fossil fuel.
Yeah.
So even from a resiliency strategical perspective as a society, it does make sense to find alternative pathways to fossils and to not continue relying on them. And even if you don't care at all about the effects on the climate, hence actually what it means is on the livability of the planet, every single time you actually use fossil fuels yourself, it's either fossil fuels you had to import into the country, so therefore it's a negative on your commercial balance sheet, or it's energy that you cannot export, so therefore it's also not showing up as a positive on your balance sheet. Right. So whatever you waste yourself is also from a business perspective is actually not a smart move. So therefore the solar is on one side reducing as much as we can the consumption of electricity, and on the other side producing and being a contributor to the grid. We also know that there are limitations for BC, for example, to increase their production capacity on renewable sources. Like the hydro is technically, to my knowledge, there's not much more that can be done in BC. So there's not many other options. You might go geothermal, but I believe that's a little bit further than where the main the main housing hotspots are in BC. So that means also you need to invest into the grid. So local photovoltaic is actually a very good answer.
Totally. I got the people in my head screaming, "What about in the winter? What about in the winter? What about in the winter?" How do your style, your approach to building using the sun in everything, how does that work in the winter?
Well, in the winter, actually, it's really not that much of an issue. So the one topic that you have to think about, but that's something you probably know more about than myself, is when you have a lot of snow falling onto your solar panels. That would be a case where then you can't necessarily rely on them, but there is the option, to my knowledge, also to have, for this specific case, actually heaters on the panels to actually melt the snow away, which then enable you to get access to sun again. So that's one option. And for I must also add to that our building system, by using mass timber. So the mass timber, I know in North America it's seen as very wasteful to use a lot of lumber for housing where you could go for stick frame. The the one advantage of mass timber is actually also the thermal and mass capacity that it brings to the building without being concrete, for example, which is also a topic when it comes to CO2 emissions, but also availability. And sand is maybe not that much in BC, but around the world, quite a bit of a problem. Some people might have heard of the topic of sand mafia, where sand is actually just stolen from certain areas of the world and then shipped on the other side of the continent, and all of a sudden some places loses their beaches because the sand just disappeared.
What?
Overnight.
Oh man, that's another podcast episode.
Yeah,
Sand mafia.
Yeah, that's happening. There's quite a bit of documentation on that. If people are interested, they can Google it. But
Wow.
that's actually what is behind skyscrapers in many places of the planet, because you can't use the sand from deserts. It doesn't work for construction.
Huh.
So you have to go for other types of sand, for example, what is at the bottom of the ocean.
Wow.
And
Okay.
but anyway, so that's therefore not going for concrete. And the thermal mass actually also enables to dampen the or to store actually energy as energy directly as heat energy in the building, which is not possible in the same way with the stick frame approach. And so that also enables them to move through the colder nights,
Right.
while actually even enabling, for example, on one side in the winter, but for the summer, the summer actually might become the trickier part in the future, as you have hotter and hotter and longer seasons of hot weather, potentially with wildfire smoke. So with the difficulty of how do you actually ventilate the building, how do you provide fresh air, and these are topics that actually I believe we're solving. So
Well, if you're gonna stand behind this is a future-proof home, you're right. You have to plan for this world we're in now, where forest fire is a part of your summer, and ventilation and cooling, and yeah, there's a lot to think about. Something else that I know you're constantly thinking about at core is health. Not only in the homeowner, but health in the builders and the people working on the project. Of course, 60 years ago, you just inhaled asbestos and that was life. And it's
exactly,
different.
it was a magical product, so everyone
Yeah.
should benefit from it.
Yeah.
Well, the asbestos topic was it has been and is a worldwide topic. So that's not a local topic, but indeed, so the we're looking also to paying attention as close as we can to every single element that goes into the construction. There's the aspect of health for the people that build it. So if you walk around a construction site, and any construction site, and you look at the packaging of most of the material, and especially the material that enables to put things together, you will see actually nice little symbols that tell you that you should not eat it, breathe it,
It's got a
touch
skull.
it, etc. So all the good stuff, and the dead fishes and all these symbols. So we're trying to stay away from that as much as possible, in order to, one, enable for everyone involved in the construction process to have less of a health exposure or risk exposure problem during their life. Because once you have also qualified people, you technically want to keep them. You don't want to lose them on the job. And they should also, if they build, if they spend their life building things for others, they should not lose their life at the same time.
Yeah, 100%.
And then obviously for the occupants, so whoever will be in the buildings, it's about mitigating the exposure to chemicals in all shapes and forms, and especially actually when you move into the realm of more airtight constructions or more insulated buildings, generally speaking, then the issue of bringing contaminants or chemicals into the interior becomes even more of a problem, because you have less natural renewal of the air inside. So you need to pay a lot more attention actually to that, and think even in the sense of paint, for example. So white paint, for example, which paint are you going to select, and do you use actually paint or not, and how much do you use, and all the layers that might be behind it, and all the products that you use to seal, glue, insulate, etc., that you would find normally. And after that, actually, it goes even further because at a certain point, eventually, you don't need the building anymore. So while we are planning actually with deconstruction in mind already, so we're thinking how can we continue to use the components that we have even in 50 years, 70 years, and turn actually all the money that you put in the first place that you never really use the value of it. Then actually also if you have something to discard, then what happens with that? And right now a lot of it would just end up in the landfill. And there is the issue also in Europe, for example, with many like the early insulation systems that have been applied, and right now there are these glued layers of things that have been outside of buildings, and when they're being renewed, now they all end up also as special hazardous material, and that costs money. It also is the question who's going to deal with it and where does it land? How is it burned? Is it something else? So if you follow actually the whole life cycle of the building, many people are actually impacted by how you build, and whatever you make as a choice of material as well. If you think also of plastic being used for construction at the stage or packaging, once you start digging actually on the lot, well, potentially you find actually some of the packaging from the previous construction still somewhere in the soil.
For sure.
And then you can also talk about microplastic and many other things.
So
there are many
of those.
Yeah, exactly. I believe, what was it? You eat the equivalent of a credit card of microplastic a year.
Oh gosh.
So that gives you a little bit of a direction. So there are many aspects on the health part as well.
Yeah. So what the heck? Yeah, 2 changes a year, and we have to accomplish all this. So this feels right, and it feels great, but it also feels incredibly overwhelming and like, oh my gosh, we have so far to go. How are you finding the conversations that you have with clients at Core? And in your world, are people open to this, or are they just like, oh, that sounds great, I'm going to go do this because it's not cheap or whatever it is?
I mean, I think so far, because you always have the bias of the environment you evolve in, the ecosystem that you surround yourself with. So obviously, in the environment I evolve mostly, people are very happy about it and open about it, and I honestly also don't necessarily try to go too much in details with every aspect, because as you're saying, it might be overwhelming, and in the end, people don't really care. They want to know that someone took care of it.
Yeah, right.
But and that someone and they assume actually that I think in the first place, people don't assume that it's so dirty to build as it is, and that it's not that harmful to build, whether it's for yourself or for the planet or whatever scale you want to think of. So I think it's also important to not overwhelm people and not to overload people with all the different considerations that you should put into it. And we're, in all honesty, we're also far from perfect. I mean, we're also not. We still have a footprint. We're still breathing. We're still doing something. So we're also not the perfection out there. But bit by bit. I mean, interestingly, actually, people are trades. When you speak with trades, they're pretty eager actually to get into that. I've had trades actually that want to work on the project and they want to actually invest themselves. So
cool.
And they're just like, oh, okay, well, that actually sounds like a decent approach.
I mean, if you're looking for trades, you just say you're going to use less toxic materials. Okay, great. Sign me up. I'm in.
Yeah, and a big driver for them as well is involving them early and not designing or having specs that lead to them having to swear on the construction site day in, day out.
Yeah, right.
Because you can make their life hard. And you can make them work a lot overhead and hanging on a ladder and whatsoever, or you can actually try to think it through and figure out how can they actually be in and out of the site as quickly as possible so they can cash in their money quickly. The billing cycle is quicker. They have it simpler and easier. They need less tools. So there are many aspects also to get people on board. So because, for example, sustainability is not necessarily the key action. I understand also that right now, especially when you're in heated markets, housing markets like Lower Mainland or BC, generally speaking, North America probably altogether. At first, people want actually a place to live for their family and that they can actually pay for. And everything else is like, well, yep, ideally it's also safe and it's also healthy and all of that.
Honestly, like it feels like a lot. So I think it's wonderful that there's a company just doing the thinking for me. So it's like, hey, Stéphane's out there. This is all great. It sounds great. And if you can get that affordability competitive with a standard build, then I don't see why we're not all doing this. But again, I've surrounded myself with like-minded people. So it's an interesting conversation. One quick one for you here. How easy, in my mind, we're talking about a home for a family. How easy is it to transition these ideas into a building, an apartment building?
Actually, we're working on both.
Yeah.
So the transition is really not that hard. It's actually easier to achieve in a building than it is to achieve on a single family house. Just the simple topic of how compact a building is just also makes the energy topics easier. You do come then into other topics, which are, for example, the acoustics. So how do you make sure actually that many people can live next to each other and are not going fully nuts because they hear everything from the neighbor? And every time in the middle of the night when the old man from the floor above you is going for a pee at 2 a.m, you're not always being like, I know that would happen.
You're speaking from experience, it sounds like.
Well, jumping back to the beginning, I remember actually, 70% of the housing that my fire station in France was responding to was social housing, and that was actually fairly old stock of fairly poorly maintained buildings. And I remember actually thinking that I understand that people cannot be sane in there because you hear everything, every single drama that happens anywhere, you get it. Especially also in larger complexes. So it is definitely a topic, and I also understand that people that haven't experienced a multifamily building where you don't necessarily hear your neighbor or can't even notice that there is someone else in there or next door, that they might be afraid of thinking that it might be quality living as well. Because the single family house has been actually also if you look at the zoning regulations of certain places, you still see, for example, minimum distances to someone else's lot for where you can actually put a gate into your fence, because actually they want the gate to be as far as possible from the other neighbors. So if your gate is squeaking, then you actually don't bother the neighbors.
Right.
So historically, because you know that actually the activity of one with a poorly planned, poorly maintained system leads to actually disturbances for the others. For example, the setbacks, which sometimes also claim to, you need to be far away from the street because the cars are loud. If you move actually in a building that is different in terms of qualities, also from an acoustics perspective, and you might have heard of people suffering, for example, from airport noises, which impacts also heavily your health in all aspects. So these are actually topics to also consider and think through. And
you're in your home, you're in your apartment, you're in your building 80% of your life.
Yeah, well, what was it again? There is like an older 90s study from the US that it was like saying that roughly 90 to 95% of your life is spent indoors. So you'd better pay attention to what indoors look like.
and kind of to circle it back at the beginning, we've kind of stopped. We pay attention to the look, the aesthetics, the walk-in closet, I want a light here because it looks cool. We pay attention to that, but we've kind of stopped architects designing it for function. It's more a look, which is kind of, again, a bigger conversation about everything as a whole.
Yep.
Yeah, no, it's, I mean, it sounds really cool. And like I said, I'm a little biased. I think there's a place for it, but I think cost is a big, yeah, I mean, what are the challenges you're facing? What are people saying to you? Stéphane, this won't work because...
Well, I mean, the standard I've heard a few times is like it can't work with mass timber because it's too expensive. But I think there's a bias in understanding what mass timber is or could be as well. But I mean the big issue I think is what makes all of real estate also suffer is all the externalities that heavily impact the typical business models, but also the values, the base numbers of every single project. So that's why we're also looking actually building how we build also unlocks different business cases. So one, there's the energy topic, because we consume so little for our own use as a building compared to what the grid would allow us to plug into. And the other thing is also by using mass timber, we also unlock the potential for carbon credits for carbon storage in the shape of mass timber elements, which then also bring in new sources of funding for the projects. So we're actually trying also to look at, so the biggest hurdle is how do we make ourselves more independent from the externalities that usually drive real estate, drives the ups and downs of real estate, interest rates, and capital flows, affordability, etc., land prices. So these are the so this is the challenge, but I believe that we have an approach that enables to mitigate at least some of it.
Mm-hmm. Wow, very cool. I think I just want to congratulate you on setting a record for the longest Solar PVcast episode.
Oh. Sorry about that.
No, it's all good. It's a great conversation, but it really makes me and reminds me that it's all about conversation, and it all has to start right at the beginning, at the design of the building we live in, and every part has to be thought about, which is why it's so great that there are companies out there doing this. And it's just a matter of having these conversations, putting podcast episodes out for people to listen to. And so maybe they have a pause and think, wow, this is actually not out. This isn't the person living in the log cabin up on the mountain with the wild solar panels. This can be here. I can do this. It's not the hippie. It's not the hippie. And in solar, we have that conversation, and there's that stigma around for sure that, I'm not a hippie. I don't need solar. It's fine. And it goes back to all the stuff that we covered at the beginning. I mean, we just hit the hour mark here, so I should probably say thank you, and thank you for your time and your knowledge, and I hope to have another conversation, and maybe we can pick like one topic and we can just dive in on that one.
Oh yeah, sure. Anytime we can make a list of topics and then
yeah,
but maybe we'll first see actually how your audience reacts to that podcast. They
we'll
got bored after 20 minutes.
We'll see. I will say we do have to talk because there's a great product out there that's a metal solar roof, and it's from Europe. And I'm like, oh yeah, this would be so good on your builds. I'm sure you're already looking at that, but it covers the aesthetics that everyone wants. They don't want the blue solar panels because they think they're still blue. They want that sleek look. Anyways, that's also another conversation.
Happy.
Stéphane Doise, founder of Core Climate-Oriented Real Estate, joining us from Europe, operates in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. Thank you so much for your time and on this conversation.
Thank you very much for having me here, Chris. It was a pleasure.
The Solar PVcast by Shift with Chris Palliser. To begin your solar journey, visit shift.ca.